I'm going to show you how the professionals build gravel roads and driveways that are built to last. I'll show you how to avoid some of the costly mistakes I've made and I've seen others make over the years, and how to make your road, driveway, or parking lot look pretty. You'll impress all your friends and neighbors. You'll be the cool kid in town. I've been involved with building forest roads as long as I can remember. Some of my first memories were sitting on my dad's lap when he was running a dozer building logging roads. My maternal grandfather worked in the sand, gravel, and concrete business most of his adult life. One of my uncles worked a lot with rock in his excavating business. I spent the last week building this road with one of the top go-to guys in the area with decades of experience building roads and rock. Since I may have picked up a few things about roads and rocks along the way, I'm going to share a few of those things with you today. We started out down in these low spots that had some tough, muddy, sloppy conditions to deal with, much less than ideal conditions. In these places where it's prone to getting muddy, I wanted to put down some good base rock. In this case, we went with 4-inch minus, which is a coarse rock, good base rock, which means it went through a 4-inch screen, so all the rock is 4 inches and smaller, including all this smaller material down to very fine material. The reason we use the 4-inch rock, it has more surface area. It's much harder to push that into the mud. If you have a small rock, that's easy to push into the ground. If you have a whole bunch of small rocks, you can get the same amount of surface area, but it's easier to push all those in the mud because the mud will come up between the rocks. If you have a road covered with all these big rocks, it's much harder to push those into the ground, and there are fewer holes for mud and dirt to come up through in between the rocks. But we don't only want to put the big rocks in there, we want the minus that has all the fine material. The smaller rocks fit in between the big rocks, helps plug those holes, and it helps lock these rocks in place. Then we have even finer material that interlocks in between those rocks. After that gets packed down by driving over it, that holds it in place so the rocks don't move, they stay in place. Which I think is redundant because not moving and staying in the same place, I think those are the same things. But here's the finished road. We have all the big chunks with the little pieces in between holding everything together. For building roads, we want to use crushed rock like this. We don't want to use river rock. River rock is rock that's mined out of rivers. That's why they call it river rock, I think. It's spent its life, well, rocks aren't alive. It has spent its time, well, part of its time, rolling down the river with the water, and it knocks all the jagged edges off and makes the rocks more round. I wish I had some river rock here to show you, but I don't because I'm using crushed rock, not river rock. River rock is good for drain rock, but it's lousy for road building. Those round rocks, well, you know what happens with round. Long ago when Grog invented the wheel, he didn't invent triangle wheels with jagged corners on them. He didn't invent square wheels with jagged corners on them. Well, they did in Canada, but that's another story. He invented, I don't know if it was a he or a she actually, Grog, that could go either way. They were round because round moves. Round is easy to move, it rolls. Same with river rock. River rock rolls, they rub against each other easily, there's not as much friction. That's why we want this crushed rock with all these jagged edges and corners and flat surfaces. When you have all these angles interlocking, it's hard to roll. All these angles and flat surfaces lock together. As river rock tumbles down a river over years, decades, centuries, or more, it becomes really smooth. Smooth round rocks push into the, ow, something sharp down there. Smooth round rocks push into the ground easily, whereas something rough and jagged doesn't push into the ground as easily. Of course, this one's a lot bigger than my finger, so not the best comparison, but the point still holds. When was the last time you got to play in the dirt? Sometimes it's fun just to play in the dirt. I think little young me would be pretty happy to know when I grew up and when I'm this age, I still get to play in the dirt sometimes. When we're not playing in the dirt, when we're building roads, if there's a place where the rocks might be likely to smush down into the ground, into the mud, We want to put down some big base rock. We don't want river rock, we want crushed rock. If you are getting rock from a quarry that is getting river rock, we want to crush that. Well, we don't want to because we don't have a crusher, but we want them to crush that rock with their crusher into these angular pieces before we put them on a road, which is not always as easy to do with river rock, and you're still going to have some rounded edges on that rock. It's not the best, but in some places that's all they have. If we go over here, I'll show you why we decided to do 4" minus on most of this road. I put 4" minus on this lower road years ago, probably at least 10 years ago, and it is holding up beautifully. It had all that truck traffic the last week, hauling tons and tons, many tons of rock up to where we were working. The big rocks look a little bit like a cobblestone. It has years of accumulated tree debris on it, so it doesn't look that great, but it's a good surface, no potholes, no mud puddles. The 4" rock with all the fines in between were put there and they stayed there. 4" minus makes great base rock, but it's not always that nice to drive on. That's one of its problems. It's a rough surface to drive on, or at least it can be. This spot wasn't too bad, but if we go around the corner, there was a spot that was pretty rough. This is all 4" minus. It's doing a great job of holding up well, but from here down, we covered it in 1.5" minus, which is rock that has gone through an 1.5" screen, so it's rock 1.5" and smaller. Since we have a good established base of 4" minus rock underneath to keep it from sinking in the mud, we can put this finer rock on top that makes a much better driving surface. With this, we also want it to be crushed rock with all the angular fines to hold it all together. This thin layer of 1.5" minus will make a good driving surface on top of that already established base rock. If we want it to be even smoother, we could go to a smaller rock like 3/4 minus. But I went with 1.5" because I think the little bit bigger rock stays in place better. It's less likely to be pushed around by vehicles driving on it. I think. But from here on, starting fresh with a newly rocked road, we went 4" most of the way. A lot of this we went at least 6 inches deep. Some of these places that are prone to getting muddy and getting ruts, it might be 8 inches deep here or more. We want a good base, and we don't want any ruts, mud puddles, potholes. We want it to be good and solid. When we get to places like this that have a little bit of a slope, I don't know if you can tell, you are higher than I am. It's sloped this way. We've never had much of a problem with ruts or mud in this part of the road. In that case, we don't have to put the rock as thick in these kind of places. This is a spot that could be a problem. This rock didn't have a lot of fines in it. It was mostly the big, chunky, bony stuff. Sometimes that happens. The rock pit doesn't always give you consistent rock. Sometimes you have loads with more fines, sometimes you have loads with fewer fines. And what happens when they load a dump truck, a lot of times the bigger rocks roll to the edges where those fines don't roll as easy and they stay in the middle. When they dumped it here, the fines ended up in the middle and the big rocks are on the outside. Especially coming up the hill here, we have all these big rocks. They are loose because they don't have the fines in them holding them together. Here in the middle, we have fines that are holding the rocks together. We don't over here. As I'm getting a better look at this, I think this is going to be a problem. As I come up the hill, I'm going to start spinning on these loose rocks. I think what we need to do here is get a load of 1.5" and spread that on top of this to fill in all these gaps in the big rocks. Over here, we had a better load where we have plenty of fines holding the rocks together. This should be good. Once we get it to this point where we have a good layer of base rock, we could put some top rock on it, some 1.5" or 3/4 to make a really smooth driving surface. I decided to wait on that. I'm going to drive on it over the winter, see how it holds up, in case there are places we need to fix. If we start developing ruts, we might need to fill those in, let it sit over the summer, let everything dry out, then it should be good. At that point, I think that's a better time, in this case, to put my top rock on it. Keep in mind, what we are doing here is what we have found to work well in this area. What we do here is different than what a lot of people do in other areas, but different areas are different. Different areas have different soil, different rock, different weather, climate, moisture conditions. I know in the East Coast, they do things a lot differently. Well, things are a lot different out there than they are here. If you watched my last two videos, you know Jeremy from the YouTube channel Jeramy Reber, Pure Dirt, did most of the work here. He gets all kinds of comments on his channel, people telling him how he's doing it wrong, how he should have done it this way and that way and the other way. I can imagine a lot of people want to know why we're not putting down fabric or felt under this. That works well in some circumstances, but in these kind of circumstances, Jeremy has tried that. He's had a lot of problems with it. People tell him he should use a vibrating roller to compact the soil. What he's found with rollers is if you do that on this kind of soil when it's wet, it brings that moisture up to the surface and creates mud. There are reasons why we aren't doing it certain ways. What I'm showing you here is not the way to do it. It's a way to do it. It's the way we are doing it under these circumstances. If you're going to put rock in an area that's much different than this, I suggest you consult some people in your area that have experience putting down rock in those circumstances. Now as I climb down off my soapbox, let's go look at some more rock. As we come up the hill, this was an area where it is a slope, but it did have a problem with mud and rutting because there's a spring, well, a seep up the hill that would tend to come down the road. He made a diversion up there, so hopefully it will go away. But we went extra thick here on the rock because it's a problem area. As we leave that problem area, the rest of this never had much of a rutting problem. The rock's maybe only 4 inches deep. Rock is expensive now, especially to haul it out here. So if you have a place where you don't need it to be deep, it's good to not have to go deep. We put down 4-inch minus all the way up here to St. Louis. This is the spot where we changed strategy as we went up through my rodent moat. Up here we're getting into different conditions, so we can treat it differently. Down below, it's in more of the lowlands where water tends to accumulate. It's shady, it doesn't get much sun in the winter. Up here, we're on more of a convex slope where water tends to drain off quickly. It's a sunny place where it dries out quickly. For many years, I have had 1.5 minus from here up. It was a thin layer I spread with my dump trailer, but it held up quite well. In more ideal conditions like this, 1.5 minus can make good base rock. This stretch of road had more of an outslope than I wanted, so I had Jeremy regrade it, so we had to start over with new rock. I decided not to go with the 4-inch up there. For one, I don't think we need it, and 4-inch just doesn't look very good. It just doesn't look as nice as the finer rock, and it's not as nice to drive on. This stretch of road is part of my view that I have to look at every day, or at least every day that I'm at this place. I think that finer rock just looks so much better. I've been trying to take a lot of the ghetto out of this place. Having a nice looking stretch of road right there is one step in that direction. Up here on top we put down 3/4 minus, directly on the dirt, nothing in between. We're on a ridge here. It drains well. I've never had a problem with rutting here. It does get a little bit slick in the winter sometimes, a thin layer of mud. That's when we get the freezing and thawing, where it freezes at night. That top 1 or 2 of soil will expand from the ice. Then during the day, it melts and it creates a sloppy, muddy mess. This should cover that, take care of that situation. We went with the 3/4. It's so much easier to spread. Under the carport, there's not enough room for the excavator to spread it in here. Jeremy just dumped it in here with his bucket, then I spread it out with a hand rake. The 3/4 minus is so much easier to work with. It's easier to spread, it looks nicer, and maybe more importantly, it's so much better to walk on. It feels better under your feet than walking on those clunky 1.5 or especially 4-inch rocks. It's just more gooder up here with the 3/4. On the last video, we forgot to do a closing when Jeremy finished, loaded up his excavator and took off because we got busy talking and it was cold and we were being dumb. He was planning on saying he made my roads more gooder, but we didn't get a chance to do that. I'll give that one to him. He made my roads more gooder. I didn't get any video footage of that last day spreading rock up here. I guess I just got tired of getting video footage of spreading rock. How much spreading rock and dumping rock out of dump trucks can we watch? But I did get some footage of repairing the damage the trucks did running over the new road. On that fresh rock, those heavy trucks made some ruts in some places, which is normal. Those heavy trucks help to compact, especially the parts where tires are going to be driving over it in the future. After we're done running the rock trucks over it, he goes back over it, cleans all that up. I'm happy with how the road turned out. Jeramy's always great to work with. After a week, he loaded up all of his devices. Did this very fancy move where he reached down with his bucket, lifted up both ramps at the same time. And away he rode off into the sunset. Except for the part where there was no sunset. It was early afternoon. He would have made it home well before the sunset. I think my first story sounded better though. If you missed the first couple videos building this road, I'll put maybe a playlist up here of road building videos and something else for you to watch. That should keep you busy until I come out with the next video. And I'll put a link in the description to Jeramy's channel as I ride off into the sunset. Actually, I'm going the opposite direction of the sunset, but oh well.